Well, you know, I think God and Moses both just have enormous respect for each other.
To come live with me.
One gladiator has that same right spirit as in that reincarnated.
Look, the judges are nodding. Even the Egyptian judge is impressed.
Until recently, you claimed that the Earth revolved around the sun.
Welcome to History Bites. I'm Rick Green. Back in 1995, a fanatical ex-soldier put a huge load of explosives at the base of a large government building in Oklahoma City. His subsequent arrest, trial, and execution were a media circus. Well, something similar happened 4 centuries earlier. Another ex-soldier named Guy Fawkes put explosives under a large government building, the British Houses of Parliament. Fawkes and his co-conspirators were angry at their government for persecuting English Catholics. They wanted their protests heard, so they used 2 tons of explosives. Luckily for the King and Company, the gunpowder plot was defused before defuse was lit. But the nation was stunned to learn that English terrorists had planted an English bomb on English soil. So, let's tune into the year 1606 for live coverage of Fawkes' farewell, because nobody covers domestic terrorism, executions, and public outcry like television.
Time to go back now and revisit the tragedy of the gunpowder plot. NBC's own Nicholas Hilliard is here with pictures of the devastation as it might have been.
November 5th, 1605 is a day that will live on in the minds of many members of Parliament and the royal family. Few can forget what they almost saw and would, in fact, have seen if this terrible hate crime, the powder treason, had been successful. These images show us the carnage that would have transpired had convicted bomber Guy Fawkes been able to light the fuse and ignite the 20, some say 36 barrels of deadly and powerful gunpowder that lay, like deadly barrel-shaped snakes, poised in the cellars that stretch beneath Westminster. For more than 3 months, federal investigators have been piecing together evidence, including the anonymous letter delivered to Lord Mounteagle.
Mounteagle and I were reading the letter to King James and realized that he wasn't really concerned about this terrible blow. But then we explained that the word blow probably meant an exploding bomb. And then he got really mad.
All of England is just crying out for their daily Guy Fawkes fix. You want to know more about Guy the man, Guy the guy. Well, stay tuned to Merriment tonight for the Guy Fawkes facts. We'll look at his cutlery, Guy Fawkes' forks, and one of his pets, Guy Fawkes' fox. And after that, we'll be examining the imitation Guy Fawkes that people are burning, Guy Fawkes fakes.
You know, I don't know much about this whole gunpowder plot, but listen, everybody, just let me say this. He isn't the only Guy Fawkes, okay?
What do you mean,
Coming
Howard?
up, we got a boy actor who plays women on stage. He wears women's clothing,
really?
okay? Now that's a Guy Fawkes, yeah?
Have to make sure the punishment fit the crime. Joining us is head warden for the tower, Shelby Shackle. Mr. Shackle, this isn't an ordinary day of execution for you, is it?
No, Tom, these prisoners were condemned for attempted king killing. That's not only treason, it's also big publicity. We have to perform this execution with flawless precision. It's got to look professional.
Not like the last high-profile execution.
Exactly, the Mary Queen of Scots beheading. That was unfortunate with, multiple swings fiasco. Messy business. But it's not the process that was at fault. This was clearly a case of human error.
More live coverage from London of the brink of a blast. The day began when the condemned men were taken from the tower to the gibbet in front of Westminster. Among the prisoners, the infamous Guy or Guido Fawkes, who was discovered hanging around the cellars that run beneath the Parliament buildings. As well as 2 tons of explosives, traces of gunpowder were found on his Catholic clothing, as were 3 fuses and a flint in his papist pockets.
Of course, the method being used today isn't a quick beheading. It's hanging, drawing, and quartering. Could you take us through the specific steps involved in the process for the viewers who may not be familiar with anything but a public hanging?
Folks don't realize this is a technically advanced form of execution with more than just 3 main steps. Of course, the victim is drawn by a horse, upside down under the tail of the horse, to the scaffold, after which he's hung by the neck. At least I think that's the order it's going in today. Let me see. Drawing, hanging, quartering. Yeah, that's it.
In the early 1600s, being an English Catholic was not a reason to cry hallelujah. The British government actually had laws against practicing Catholicism. Catholics had to organize secret masses. They had to keep their icons out of sight and their beliefs to themselves. And that wasn't all they had to hide.
Hi. Today on Tainted House, we'll be looking at a problem faced by many Catholic owners of large manor houses north of London. The problem of where to hide the priest when the authorities come calling. Now, here's a priest hole gone wrong. You can see it has a thing you want to avoid the most, an obvious door line right in the middle of a sparse wall. In most cases, a tapestry would do just fine right over top. But for those of us on a budget and with the recusancy fines, who isn't these days? I think a faux fireplace would go really great here. This faux fireplace gives a nice, cozy look to the room, and with a tiny brazier inside the hiding place for your customer priest to cook his meals on, it smells real too. Okay, enough, Father Bennett. Sorry, what was that? Yeah, as you can see, because I didn't put any ventilation holes, Father Bennett is nicely soundproofed in there, and that'll help keep him safe. He can sneeze or cough or even scream, and nobody will realise that these walls have a little of that old-time religion. Oh, I think he's praying.
They call it a necktie party as a joke, but Tom, I'll tell you what, it's no party, and it's no joke.
Mr. Shackle, why would we need to go any further after we've hung the man?
Oh boy, Tom, if I had a copper every time somebody asked me that. Okay, we only hang the condemned until he's downright uncomfortable. Sometimes his windpipe gets crushed, but he's not dead yet. Then the hangman cuts him down before death sets in. And the timing is a matter for his experience and professionalism to determine.
I see. Then the person is quartered.
No. You see, people make that mistake because of the nomenclature. But there are a series of steps we must go through before that for ethical reasons. First, we cut off his private parts and show him. Then we disembowel the prisoner and make sure they see their own insides.
That must be tough to look at one's own entrails.
Tom, I think it's always painful to take a long, hard look deep inside yourself.
Now, as for the quartering...
Right, well, you see, that comes at the end, of course, and it's pretty much like it sounds. You cut off the 4 limbs. Now, of course, as the nitpickers love to point out, technically 4 limbs plus 1 torso means we should call it a fifthling, not a quartering, but I'm not going to quibble at quarters or quintuples.
And we've just had word that Guy Fawkes was pronounced dead at 8:14 Eastern London time, give or take an hour or so. We take you now live to the journalists who are invited to witness the execution.
My name is George, that's G-E-O-R-G-E, of Derbyshire, D-E-R-B-Y, sure. Guy Fawkes was drawn to the gibbet at about 7 a.m. He was strapped onto the gurney upside down. He looked at each person in the crowd as he passed. He seemed to be deliberately making eye contact with the witnesses. Many people commented on the chill that came over them as his eyes met their ankles.
Guy Fawkes actually died during the first stage of the execution, the hanging. Did you see what happened?
Yes, I did. When he was on the scaffold, I actually saw Mr. Fawkes jump off the platform real hard. Then we heard something snap, and then he just hung there all limp.
These people might have killed the king and his beautiful son Henry, as well as my dear, dear husband. This is a miniature of my husband, who is an MP that works in the Parliament buildings. I keep him right next to me all the time, always, right here.
What was your husband's name? Where's your husband? That's him?
Stand up straight.
Coming up, how did the government stop the plot? And were they in on it? In the year 1606, Guy Fawkes and 12 others were arrested, tried, and found guilty of a massive conspiracy to blow up the British Parliament building. But, like all conspiracies involving governments and angry citizens, there are alternative theories as to what really went down. Like, how could a bunch of radical Catholics get hold of 2 tons of a tightly controlled and extremely valuable substance like gunpowder? Was the gunpowder plot really a government setup to stir up more hate against Catholics? The truth is out there. Somewhere.
English justice system treats federal Catholic criminals. Tonight's flashpoint: why did it take 3 months to bring these criminals to trial? Was information fabricated, or did authorities just need lots of time for some quality torture? I'm joined by Attorney General Ed Koch to speak with me about the trial and the sentencing today. Mr. Koch is in the studio but may have plague, so we'll speak via satellite. Sir, could you tell us why it took 3 months to get this trial and execution underway?
Well, Greta, you have to understand, with a crime of this magnitude and all the international media coverage, we have to make absolutely sure that the confessions are all well documented and signed. Also, there are long lists of accused suspects. We have to extract a confession from each criminal to validate that the accused person really did take part in the plot.
Yeah, these confessions resulted from torture, did they not?
Yes, and torture takes time. It really does. It's not only physically demanding on the victims, but it really takes a toll on the torturer.
You know, ever since they discovered that bomb, they roughed up every Spaniard in sight. Those guys don't know how to deal with terrorism on their own soil from their own guys. Just because my skin is olive doesn't mean I'm a terrorist or a spy or a priest.
Yes, I am Protestant English farmer man. No habla español. Can I offer you a cream tea?
You know, if I miss a Protestant church service, I get fined. If I attend Mass in my own home, I get fined. I used to live in a mansion. Now I live in the Mission. I mean, none of us Catholics can afford any gunpowder.
You know, if they're going to accuse someone, they should look for a motive. If there was a plot, they should ask, who would benefit if all the politicians were dead?
Oh, I would.
All right, I mean, who would benefit the most?
What kind of game is Primero?
No, archery?
It's a game of cards. Jerome, who is called the Virgin Queen?
My wife.
Queen Elizabeth. Lloyd, what was the occupation of the lunatic who recently killed France's King Henry?
Postal worker.
Monk. Robert, what did the Queen do to Sir John Harrington, her godson, who invented the world's first flush toilet?
Flushed?
No, banished him from the court for telling dirty stories in front of the ladies. Eliza, what are people in Russia doing?
Speaking Russian?
Dying like flies from famine.
Well, that was very, very amusing. Now, every so often a Catholic comes along who challenges our assumptions about these vile papist scoundrels. Our next guest is one such person. He's England's premier organist, composer, and music publisher, having personally written hymns and other music for the likes of Queen Elizabeth, and now for our very own James I. So let me, without further ado, bring out a young man who, despite his repellent papish convictions, is really as fine a gentleman as any Protestant you've ever met. Please put your hands together, a fine welcome now, and pray for the soul of William Byrd.
And now, a few minutes with Andrew R.
What's with collars? First we had to deal with these crazy Elizabethan roughs, and now it's whisk collars and falling collars. Every decade, another fad. I want to holler, no more collars. Can't we just choose one style and stick with it? These changing fashions are a real pain in the neck.
Tonight on 2020, we'll look at a controversial new program that's attempting to teach hardened criminals and repeat offenders the skills they need to get a job. Can former felons find employment? The answer may surprise you.
You have banked a pathetic 3 shillings and a goat. Well now, whose village wants its idiot back? Whose gunpowder plot is short a few barrels? Whose rhyming couplet is missing a line? I'm a lady of some means, so I need a smile that's classy, upper classy. But my fancy diet of sweets and cakes was hard on me. Eventually, my maid had a better smile than I did. So I did what so many women in my circle are doing and had a few teeth removed from my maid's mouth and transplanted into my mouth. It gave me a shiny smile as noble as my birth. And it gave my maid a shiny coin for her troubles. Consider tooth transplants. It's not for everyone, just us rich folk.
Of all the heads out there on public display, Francis Tresham's is noticeably missing. Why no head?
Well, he died in December, Greta.
Tresham was the author of the so-called Mount Eagle letter, which tipped off the authorities about the secret of the whole powder treason. As Attorney General, I'm sure you're aware that there are rumors out there that Tresham escaped, or was allowed to escape, for his collusion with your government.
No, he died of a urinary tract infection in his urinary tract. In the end, it was a mercy, really. He was...
But witnesses saw Mr. Tresham wandering around London in quite good health just days before his arrest.
Well, I believe he was putting on a brave face. It's not easy talking about problems with your urinary tract. In fact, it's not easy doing anything when it's like his was. But he died all right here, not in Belgium.
Belgium?
No, I deny that. Don't even bother looking. We wouldn't have sent him to Belgium even if he had known too much.
Oh, you remember George, my cousin Bedford Jones, the sports nut.
You love sports, huh?
Oh, certainly. He even ate his cereal out of lawn bowls.
Gracie, lawn bowls are round balls that you roll on the ground.
I know. Poor Bedford. His oatmeal was always falling off the edge.
Well, that figures.
He never got to eat a mouthful. He used to get so hungry. We called him Skin and Bones Jones. But that's how he got the job in sports.
Oh, what kind of job?
Married Queen of Scots Golf Club.
You worked at a golf club?
No, George. He was a golf club. He was always putting around the golf course.
Lucky she didn't use him as a driver.
I'll say he was a terrible driver. He couldn't keep the horses straight.
You mean he couldn't keep them going down the road?
No, George. He couldn't remember which one was called Nellie and which one was Blossom.
English citizens in the 1600s couldn't be executed without the due process. Prosecutors had to gather evidence, find and arrest the suspects, build their case, and then make everything nice and legal by obtaining confessions. That part of the due process involves stretching a man on the rack until his arms went pop.
That's a good question, Greta. But I'm working with a group of people right now in the Torturers Guild who are trying to rescind the death penalty.
And your reasoning for this is?
Well, for one, we feel it sends a bad message to society that if you want to escape this miserable life, here's an out. And we feel that with the advancement in torture, killing is actually necessary.
That's a very interesting perspective, one that you would share, Mrs. Wilkes?
Yes, Greta, indeed I would. I oppose capital punishment.
Your interest in this is that your husband is a politician who would have been in Parliament had Guy Fawkes seceded.
Yes, and I know that a lot of people out there say that criminals need a strong disincentive like the death penalty for things like murder, treason, and stealing horses. But I believe that a life sentence is actually more just.
You mean because the prisoner has to spend his life suffering for his crime?
Absolutely. Nothing reminds a person of what they've done like the rack.
I couldn't have put it better myself. Believe me, I've seen it.
When we come back, all's well that ends well for Protestants. The famous Gunpowder plot was exposed before Guy Fawkes and his co-conspirators had a chance to set off the 2 tons of black powder that they'd smuggled into the British Parliament. But 5 of the gunpowder conspirators had managed to escape arrest. Very clever. Then they decided to dry out their gunpowder supplies by a campfire. Not so clever. Of course, some of the government investigators weren't exactly the brightest sparks in the tinderbox.
But can anything prevent determinate criminals from cramming dozens of large wood barrels into a sensitive area? Louise Grenville reports.
Smuggling 36 barrels of gunpowder into the cellar that runs beneath the House of Commons. It sounds difficult, dangerous, even impossible. Yet according to Parliament Security Chief Circular Saw,
it's all a matter of disguising it, and no one would even notice. Allow me to demonstrate. The trick is to smuggle the gunpowder in 36 easy-to-hide barrel-sized chunks. There are any number of tricks and techniques used by clever Catholic criminals, such as the French rope, the penguin slate, the classic double switcheroo, doggy...
Bad boy Ben Johnson is in the news this week. Seems Ben was accused of associating with the gunpowder plotters. Brainy Ben admits he had dined with the conspirators, but claims he had no idea what they were up to. He went on to say, "When I want to associate myself with a bomb, I just go and see a play by Will Shakespeare." Nice one, Ben.
And the only way of catching these criminals is if they make an error.
but there is no error in the supposition that one man could bring in that much powder past the parliamentary guards. This reporter is convinced.
There's an old English nursery rhyme, "Remember, remember the 5th of November for gunpowder, treason, and plot. We see no reason why gunpowder treason should ever be forgot." And it's not forgot. On Guy Fawkes Day, English school children set off firecrackers, build bonfires, and burn Guy in effigy. Oh, and in one town, they add the Pope to the fire. So apparently that anti-Catholic feeling isn't forgot either. Some historians believe the government rigged the entire plot. Apparently, government records of controlled gunpowder supplies are available for every year except the 3 years surrounding the plot. And if you remember the controversy over televising the execution of the Oklahoma City bomber, consider that Guy Fawkes and his chums were caught before the bomb went off, and they were still hanged, drawn, and quartered in public. Sometimes even when nothing happens, history still bites.
It's all conspiracy theory, huh? You know, okay, you think that there was a gunpowder plot? Oh man, no. The gunpowder plot was a government setup, right? I mean, okay, listen to me. Did anyone ask those guys where they got the gunpowder, right? I mean, look, gunpowder, black powder is a government-controlled substance, man. You think 2 tons is gonna go missing and no one's gonna notice?
Even if these gunpowder Johnnies have succeeded, these bomb chappies trying to blow up the upper house, would that have hurt it to blow the upper house up? Doesn't that just make it a whole lot more?